So thank you, everyone. I'll just do some brief introductions of our wonderful panel. To my left, running off the stage, is Steve Martocci. Is that how you say your last name? Martocci, sorry. Who runs Splice, which is a very cool company that has really democratized and made it super easy for producers and people who make music to get sounds, to license them, and basically everything that you hear in pop music, or especially in hip hop. What was it? Snare, bamboo snare number 3, which you all know because you've heard it, comes from Splice. So very, very cool company. Really glad to have you here. Jennifer Justice, who runs the Justice Department, which is a female-led and all-female legal advocacy firm.
Consulting and advisory as well.
Consulting and advisory, and she she worked at Superfly, and she also worked at Rock Nation. She's a lawyer by trade, and a very successful one, so thank you. Nabil Ayers, who works at 4AD, very cool indie label. You've been there 10 years? 10 years. And he also ran a record store in Seattle called Sonic Boom, which was a great, great store. Marilyn Laverty, who runs Surefire Media, one of the biggest and most successful independent PR firms that works in music, not exclusively, but mostly. Her clients include Bruce Springsteen, Elvis Costello, Peter Shapiro. Who else? What?
Brooklyn Bowl. Yeah.
Brooklyn Bowl, of course. And Daniel Glass of Glassnote Music, an industry veteran who's worked at labels big and small, has broken probably more records than most people, and is running a really successful company today that has some really excellent bands, including Phoenix, Bedouin, who I love, and what's that?
No, Unius Mavon.
Yeah. Pick up your microphones, guys. Don't be shy. Come on. All right. So what we're going to talk about today is basically, what it means to sort of go at it on your own, to go indie, as it were. Not everyone here is running their own company, but they all have experience running their own operations. And in the music business, it can go one of two ways. And in these instances, it's gone very well. So we're going to sort of learn a little bit about the secrets of their success. And I hope that they'll share some anecdotes and personal stories, of how they became, as rich and famous as they are. So we'll start with Steve. I wanted to just, because people might not be familiar with Splice, maybe you could tell a little bit about why Splice exists.
Yeah, I'll give a little bit of a background on that. So I'm really a programmer at heart and a music fan. Music is my motivation, but I'm not a good music creator. Code is my canvas. It always had been. A few years back, I've always wanted to tangentially work on music. Like my co-founder from GroupMe and I, we started that out of needing to go to concerts with our friends, having gone to hundreds of Fish and Disco Biscuits concerts, trying to stay in touch with each other, and needing a way to chat. And so group chat came from that, and we built it in 24 hours at a hackathon. And ended up selling that to Skype, and then next it was, what did I want to work on that truly motivated me next, because I really care about that, and music again became the thing that motivated me. Programmers love their craft. They love the open source nature, the collaborative nature, the ability to kind of just pick up and learn and go and contribute and collaborate. And if you're a music fan who is into programming, you always wonder, where is this for music? How do musicians interact? How do they share? How do they learn? And you start to study this space, and it's a really ugly looking industry, music creation. It's an industry that's about 99% pirated. There's no good success stories of any kind of venture-backed big exits. There's not a lot there to kind of point to as success. And so, it actually came down to a friend of mine, John Gutwillig from the Disco Biscuits. He got into programming after GroupMe was successful. And then he one day, right before he goes on stage at Camp Bisco, is like, where's GitHub for music? And GitHub is one of these tools we use as programmers. And the idea had always been at the top of my too crazy to do list, because you're gonna fail, it's gonna be hard. And having him say that from the artist side just like put me over the top and was like, all right, let's do this. And I had a co-founder, Matt, who we created this with, and it's just been an amazing evolution of watching us kind of unblock creativity and let creativity flow and foster an open ecosystem that gets people paid for the creator side of music. And it's been a great journey. So I continue to keep music as the motivator and kind of software as the canvas.
And how long has Splice been around now?
It's 5 years now.
Wow.
But you know, the first year of that was literally just embedding yourselves in the creative process, trying to build the right thing. The second year was getting that out there and iterating on it. And then we kind of flipped a business model on in the third year, and that's when it really started to take off. And you know, now, you know, something like half of top 40 music you can listen to and hear our sounds in. And there's this amazing kind of thing happening where, you know, all the streaming, there's so many more musicians making money in the streaming side, but that means so many more need to create and are inspired to create. And by kind of stepping into the beginning of the process too, so we have these pros and then we have these kids. And so we went around telling people that like, kids either decide to play Fortnite or make music with Splice. Because parents were telling me this. This was actually happening. Then all of a sudden, we end up in a music video. It's a kid playing Fortnite and goes over to his computer and there's Splice on the screen. And I was just like, okay, that's cool. So yeah, it's been 5 years, the longest I've ever worked on anything. So, but I want it to be a multi-generational thing if we do it right. I think this is a once-in-a-generation opportunity to completely change the creator space in music and build so much transparency and rapid learning and more careers. And no one's brought this to the creator side, so I couldn't be working on anything cooler.
Okay. Well, with that in mind, I wanted to go to Daniel and Marilyn. You guys both worked at labels. Marilyn, you were at Columbia. And, you know, you saw the business, you know, from the top down. Why did you decide to go on your own?
I was at Columbia Records for 10 years, and I had a great experience there, and it really it was a tremendous education for me. I think like a lot of entrepreneurs, I went off on my own at the point that it felt like it was necessary. I think that you go through a period of thinking about how something might work, and then all of a sudden it becomes less of a risk than just a necessity. I wanted to start a company that had more of a music journalist sensibility. I had been a music journalist, and at that point a lot of the companies were more celebrity oriented. I had also commuted into Midtown Manhattan for many years, and I wanted to start a company kind of selfishly in Brooklyn. So we actually were one of the first entertainment companies in the new Brooklyn entertainment era, not back to Mary the K, but so that was another thing that I wanted to do and that made us different.
Excellent. And Daniel?
So I was at major labels, but reluctantly. The result of 3 acquisitions or mergers of independent labels, so I was never hired per se by a corporate entity. I would never have applied for those jobs. But when you're at Chrysalis and SBK, and then what Doug Morris and I started at Rising Tide, those were either gobbled up or bought by major companies and got even bigger. I was sort of uncomfortable in all 3 situations when they were bought. So I think like Marilyn, I used the education and the road and the street to get ready for this journey of Glassnote, which I just wasn't ready for until I turned 48 years old. It was all education, education, education. Whether I was DJing, mixing, promoting, I wasn't ready. And I think too many people go into it not ready or not having a partner that offsets their strength or weaknesses. So when I got out of finishing school, as I said, at 48, that was my grad school or my degree or my master's, I was ready to do it. Some of it came from motivation of competitiveness, some of it came from the market situation, but when I looked those models of A&M or Chrysalis or Island, I said, that's what I want to do, and do the best job possible. I wanted world-class headliners at festivals. I didn't care really about how many records we sold. It was really about having the biggest live artists in the world. And then when Phoenix broke, and Mumford & Sons broke, and Tudor broke, and Temper Trap broke, and Childish Gambino and Churches, it's like, wow, we can do that. And people like 4AD can do it because we share daughter together. And now we have these babies coming up, and all I care about is those babies getting on that main stage of Glastonbury or Lollapalooza or Bonnaroo one day. So I think frustration, motivation, I'm not sure what the actual thing was, but I was sort of angry. Maybe that was it. Like, can't let this happen again. And I was never one of them, and I just couldn't do it again. I knew how to build it, and then just kept getting sold or flipped. And I said, this is crazy, but I wanted something to last for a long time.
So maybe you could address, and Nabil, you could as well, the risk assessment of running an indie label. I mean, I imagine starting something from scratch is incredibly difficult.
It's the scariest thing in the world. You know, we started with 2 laptops. My partner did not get paid. The interns were sort of like the guys from The Godfather that show up that night in the hospital and say, just put your collars up before they, urinate on themselves. And that was our team. And it was very, very scary because you go to the bank, you say to your wife, we're going to take some more money out, and then a little bit more money out. We were very, very fortunate. We had a hit in our first 6 months. We had a massive hit by an artist called Secondhand Serenade, which sold a few million. That helps. Now, whoever you speak to, whether it's Chris Blackwell, Chris Wright, Martin Mills, doesn't matter. Hits are good. And if you have hits early, whether you're in the clothing business, the film business, it does help. But it is very, very scary. The motivation for most entrepreneurs is staying in business, is not going out of business or staying in business. So my fear, whether it's Friday, Saturday, or Sunday, which are the 3 pivotal days, are we going to be in business the next day? I still think that way. I am petrified, nervous on Sunday nights. What are we going to do tomorrow? What's it going to be like? And I really mean that. And I think if you don't have that nervousness, you cannot be doing what we're doing because it is very scary.
Nabil, how would you credit 4AD's success over so many years? I mean, it's got a stellar reputation. It's a tastemaker label. How does it keep going?
I mean, the company started in 1980. It's almost 40 years old. I started at 480 in 2009, just over 10 years ago, which is crazy, and was obviously already familiar with the label and went back with Pixies and Cocteau Twins and all those bands when I was in college. I mean, first and foremost, I think Martin Mills, who now owns it, would say it's the artist, it's the music, and it's those artists going out there and connecting with people. And the label's job is to back that up with press and radio and marketing and all the things that we do, but none of that works if the music isn't great, or at least great to the people who think it's great. That's still really what it is, and that's what it's about.
And what do you do? What's your job specifically?
I'm the U.S. general manager, so I sort of oversee all the campaigns and work a lot with the UK office where the label's based, and work with managers and artists to sort of piece together every department in the building, of which there are many. I think we have 60 people in the U.S. now in New York. So it's really just putting together a cohesive, year and a half, 2-year campaign for every record we put out, which is about 10 a year.
Well, one thing they say about entrepreneurship is that, people start companies because they see a void. There's a need and there's a void, and you have the skills, the ability, the wherewithal to fill it. Jennifer, what do you think was missing in the legal world that made you leave these very steady jobs to really great gigs to do it yourself?
Well, what I was seeing, throughout my career, whether or not, I was working with, Jay-Z or Redman or Method Man or Outkast, I was also always on the side advocating for gender pay, and I represented a lot of female executives, a lot of female artists, and what was, never there was, the ability, like what they really wanted to fight for, right? Women have traditionally just been happy to be invited into the room. And, I was getting all this experience, and I was invited into the room, and it was great. And I got to see the blueprint of how, no pun intended, whenever I say that with Jay-Z, it's like, I got to see the blueprint of how business is really done. And, after leaving Rock Nation and then, expanding my experiences at Superfly as a president and in a different role, I knew that, and to kind of everybody's point here already, that I was ready to do the next step. And for me, the natural progression was to focus solely on female founders, brands, executives, talents, and creatives with 2 other women, because they were coming to me asking me to be, either their lawyer, and I hadn't practiced law in 9 years until I started the Justice Department, to be their lawyer or to be their CEO or president of a female-founded company, because they couldn't find anybody else to fight for them. So finally, women were ready to fight for the equality, and I was like, this is the time that I have to step out of my comfort zone and just do it, because the time is now.
Well, speaking of comfort zone, I'm kind of curious, and I'd love for you all to answer this. What's a lesson about your business that you had to learn the hard way? Who wants to go first?
I'll go first on this one.
Go.
I thought about this. You sent this one to us. And this goes back to, we haven't talked about this, but I owned a record store in Seattle for a long time, and that was actually the first business that I started with my partner, and we were 25, and we just kind of got a small loan and really figured it out. Just rented a small space. Very much to what you're saying, Daniel. Had no idea if we were going to exist the next Monday, which was a very exciting and terrifying feeling. And got to the point, and this was in Seattle in the late 90s, early 2000s, where the store was really starting to grow, and it was, we couldn't rely on our friends to pick up shifts, and we actually had to hire a couple employees. And after a while, we ended up with 23 employees in 3 locations, and it was so hard to manage those people, and we had no idea what we were doing. We were just like 2 guys in our late 20s who started a record store because it sounded fun and sounded cool, and everyone wants to be their own boss, and everyone wants to have people working for them, but that's the hardest thing still that I've ever done in my career, is try to manage those people working for us.
Okay. Daniel, what about you?
The hardest lesson, or
What's a lesson you learned the hard way?
So if we get to know each other, you're going to know that showing up is probably the 2 words that I use the most. I didn't show up 3 or 4 times in the last 12 years, and I balanced that because I did not get to sign, or we did not get to sign those artists, and they just wanted me to show up. The balance of that, now that I wear my other cap of being a father of 3 kids, is that I had more time for the artists that we do have. It's good rationalization after the fact, when you're not being a sore loser, but I should have gotten on those planes. I should have gone to see those artists. I was far down the road, and there's just different sets of circumstances. So my advice to anybody listening is showing up is really good. Do it early, do it quickly, and people remember that. Artists remember that. So I just regret that I didn't show up for those things, because 3 of them were 2 of them were the most massive records of the last 12 years, but you can't get them all. And I think the lesson of that also is, though, the positive is we knew about them. We were right there. So not knowing about it is really, really bad. That's the biggest mistake. Then you have to fire people or realize that you're out of touch. I think that's a hard thing. Dropping an artist is very hard. Parting ways, the emotion for an entrepreneur, because you're so romantic about it. And it's a tough thing to call somebody and say you'd be better off somewhere else. And that's like a truthful statement, but it's very hard to tell a young or middle-aged or older creative when you part ways. And sometimes it's financial, sometimes it's creative. With us, it's usually a creative, wall or block. And that's hard. It's really, really hard. Those maybe are the toughest things. And then on a selfish basis is missing one show, because you can't be in every city. You have 4 festivals in one weekend. Oh, I'd love to be at them all. And you see a moment. I wish I was there. That's a nice thing, but that's hard.
Yeah.
It's hard that, what do they call it, this era? FOMO?
Yes.
Sorry. So the FOMO is really tough as an entrepreneur, because you want to be everywhere. You want to micromanage and see it and be there. And even though your people are having a great time, you want to be there to share it with them. Not to be there to check the box, but to be there with your team. And that's hard. And it's nice, but that should be my hardest.
Got it.
I'll do one
Yes,
on that.
Steve.
I think I learned that timing and luck is like a third of it. And my first company I started, I spent 3 years working on this software that did dynamic images for email marketing, and like it was cool, and it was just too far ahead of its time, both in my kind of career and my ability to like kind of know. But like it was too early. New York tech hadn't become a thing yet. VC, it wasn't really like that strong at the kind of like angel level yet, and the marketers just like couldn't understand what this did. And I spent 3 years of my life on it. It failed. I lost my parents' money who had helped me get it going, and then a friend of mine went out and did that idea. I advised them a couple years later, and it's like massively successful. And timing, and like the same thing, I've learned that the hard way, and I've learned it in the really good way. Like GroupMe hit this little window where there wasn't group text messaging on the iPhone yet, and like the WhatsApp hadn't taken over. There was no Facebook Messenger, and like we just hit this little window that probably existed for just a couple months. And like you can have all the vision and force with a first Splice product. We were the first thing we did, our version control system, just ahead of where people were thinking, and then we kind of iterated towards stuff that really stuck in the kind of year 3 and beyond. And like you can have all the foresight of like where something should be, but like the timing of the market can really make it difficult. If you hadn't had your hit in the first 6 months, like, it can be way more difficult. And so like, timing and luck and putting yourself out there, I think the showing up is a really good point. Like putting yourself out there to kind of create some of that luck, create some of those serendipity opportunities, talk about your stuff to see what random opportunities could be happening that you're not exposing yourself to. I think that like that's so important. So.
Jennifer?
I like that you hit on timing, because like that happens as a lawyer who represented artists, certain artists that they were just a little bit before their time, and it just kills you. You're like, they're so great, everybody should know. But I mean, a few things, and I think it's like one of the things is that nothing replaces experience. You can have the hottest artists in the world and like, leverage with them, and that doesn't mean that you're the best, or you can't learn more, or that you're going to get the same deal as somebody who's been doing it longer than you, and as much as you work and as hard as it is. And so those things just can come back to bite you in the ass if you think that because you're as strong as that artist that you had and you don't have that leverage anymore, that it doesn't mean that you were so great, and it can be a little humbling at times, but I think that's probably the best things in life, right?
Well, since you guys, even being an entrepreneur, just working in the music industry, the music business is very much a lifestyle business. It is 24/7. Daniel, you're saying your weekends are basically spent stressing out, it sounds like. How do you balance your life with your job, or are they all just intermingled? Are you just always working?
So we got married 37 years ago, and we had a 3-hour rule, so we had kids really quickly. Anything over 3 hours, I could barely afford it. I was working at Chrysalis. The kids went. Whether I had to borrow money, the kids, anything over past Chicago or the other way, London, kids would go. And we still have that rule, my wife and I, 37 years later. So we'll be in Copenhagen this weekend with Mumford & Sons, celebrating her birthday. That's the lifestyle, though. You get to see Mumford & Sons, you get to eat great food, you get to meet them, make some plans. I think if you don't, that's what I really do. I stress out at festivals, and then you go to Bottle Rock the next weekend to see a baby band and the headliner. That's what I do. And then I was at Great Escape for 2 days in Brighton, 1 day of rain, 1 day of sun. But I want to do that, and that's what entrepreneurs do. And I remember when Interscope first started, they had the same fear, and they started after SBK. And we had our Wilson Phillips and our Blurs and our Jesus Joneses and our Vanilla Ices, and they came on with 2 hits, Marky Mark and Gerardo, before Primus, before 9 Inch Nails. And that gets you going. And you need hits. You need hot clients. You need, we all need that. And so that's the lifestyle. And I think if you don't want to do that, there's 2 things. You have to want to do that, and you have to work really hard. You have to work really, really hard. And I enjoy working hard, and I try and make that contagious within our team. And then the hottest artists or the biggest artists are always the ones that work the hardest. So that's the lifestyle you talk about. And they want it really, really badly. It's the ones that look at the other artists, say, show me their schedule, now double it, to their record company or to their manager, whether it's Ed Sheeran or Taylor or Beyonce or, we have this young artist, Jade Bird. She's indefatigable. She doesn't stop. And she's going to be one of the biggest artists in the world. She's a guaranteed headliner. And, she works harder than me, and that's hard to say. That's a statement.
Yeah.
So I think that's the lifestyle. But she made a decision when she was 14, and she went to the Brit School. And those people are different than most of us. That's beyond 1%. That's the smallest percentage. And you guys worked with Adele, and she's one of them. And Ed's one of them. And Drake's one of them. And they're different. They're really different. So you want them. And that's how you build a business.
Yeah. I mean, I was at the ASCAP Expo a couple of weeks ago, and someone made a really good point about being a successful songwriter. You won't make it if you're 92% there. You have to be 100%. It's not good enough. And even at 100%, you still might not make it. But at 92%, you definitely won't, which I thought was interesting. Marilyn, I mean, I've emailed you on Sundays. You're down at the beach. You're answering your emails. Are you just constantly working?
I think it's a challenge for everybody in this day and age to not always be working. And I think everybody has to create some individual, I think everybody has to create some individual boundaries that work for them. But that being said, I completely agree with Daniel. This is our life. This is what we do. We do it because it's what we are created to do. And I think that our families and our friends and our loved ones are better off to have someone in their lives who is doing something that they really enjoy. And because we're entrepreneurs, we also get to do it the way we believe in doing it. One advantage of being an entrepreneur is that you do get to keep your own schedule. And Daniel mentioned a few times that he regrets not being there. But we do have the opportunity to make those decisions. And if it's a family graduation or something of that sort, we can say, I just really need to be there.
And Steve, in your case, just being a CEO and having to answer probably the most minuscule questions to the biggest, project-based creative thoughts, like, how is it an annoyance for you? Do you feel like you're sacrificing anything to be there for your team? I mean, how many people do you have on your staff now?
About 140 people.
Okay.
Yeah, it's real. Look, my biggest challenge over the last few years has been moving from a founder who is a creator to a CEO. And, in those early days, I ran around a lot to every event and artist we could to tell them about Splice, get them on, see them. The ones that were users, we were like, getting feedback and all that stuff. And then eventually it got to I had to hire a team to do that on multiple coasts and be in the studio with people. And, there's a whole team behind that now. And, when you're dealing with, running this company that's nowhere near where you even want it to be yet, and you're kind of going on this path of trying to double your revenue and double our payouts to artists. We want to pay another $15 million out to artists this year. So the work is different. When I was doing the very creative stuff and creating, I could work all night. I could code or create until days would go by. It wasn't a thing. And now, honestly, it's a lot of people management. It's a lot of planning. It's a lot of, and I get worn out at periods of time. And luckily, the place that I like to go for fun in music is the place that I also am usually somehow making it a very positive work trip too, because the artists are users and it becomes great. So I kind of we integrate the lifestyle and the kind of work hard, play hard kind of vibe to that. But honestly, every year the company has been a bit different in terms of where I spend my time. And it's just a constant for me. I just need to constantly be learning. The challenges are constantly changing. And making sure I have the right team to be there with the artists. And, they get to do so. It's a really fun role. But they have to be good at it.
So in terms of having a team and building your staff, how do you view diversity, gender parity? Nabil, maybe we can start with you. How's the 4AD workforce?
4AD is part of a larger company, Beggars Group,
Beggars,
which is, I think, almost 200 people worldwide now. And I feel like it's very diverse, but I think it's, I started there 10 years ago, and I think it hasn't changed drastically in a good way, meaning that when I started, it was diverse. We've always had a lot of female vice presidents. There are people of many races. It's an issue, and it's something that's talked about and thought about, but it's not something that I think we're reacting to in a reactionary way because we don't need to. It's something that's always existed and been considered and feels comfortable to me.
Marilyn?
Well, PR used to be thought of as a women's business, but we've been very welcoming to men. But really, I think, diversity and gender parity are one of the most important issues of the era. And if we're not going to lead in our business, how can we expect corporate America to do the right thing? It's very important.
Daniel?
Yeah, I don't think we purposely say female or male, best person for the job, but somehow our MD in London for the UK is female, our A&R team is female-driven, our West Coast team is completely female. Not sure why, but maybe that is something that we've been conscious of. So it's not an issue, and I think there's a lot of respect in our company. So the roster is also very female, and that changed by signing these artists. When Lauren Mayberry of Churches joined our company, she came in with great music, but also an attitude and a vision, and a strong woman. When she had her famous article in The Guardian, I think every female artist in the industry, from Beyonce, everybody perked up and said, good for you. And there's been a couple of issues lately that she's been outspoken about, which we're very much supporting. But I think if you look at our roster, it's certainly swung female in the last few years. And I'm very concerned of parity at radio, a format that I love very much. And I think that is in the Stone Ages in many cases, where country and rock radio are not represented by enough female artists. And we fight pretty hard for that. And our two bookends in promotion in our company are both female, Marley and Grace. And I tell them, go fight, go fight, go fight, because we need more women on the radio as artists. It's crazy that Casey Musgraves and Brandi Carlile win all these awards, and then they have to fight, Maren Morris to get on the radios. I don't get that. Same thing in rock. You get through, they say, oh, you see, we got one. That's not fair. And that's wrong, because it's not reflected in streaming. It's not reflected in sales, but it is reflected on the radio. And I think that's bad.
Is that sort of like because of the way the record labels have been run for so long? Like, one thing I know at working at Variety, like Sylvia Rhone, when she just got named chairman of Epic Records, it was a really big deal that a woman is going to be running a major label, and it's kind of amazing to think that it took this long. Are these just sort of old and outdated policies? Like, what do you think it is?
Yeah, I think it's we lost 15 years in our business because people stopped training and mentoring. In those 15 years, though, Julie Greenwald, Ethiopia, took over what Polly Anthony and other artists used to do, other executives. So I think we have some incredibly, Michelle Anthony is a powerhouse, one of my dear friends, but someone I really respect. So I don't think it's not represented there. Jody Gerson, I keep going, but I think the system of radio, you didn't have female program directors and DJs getting into power positions, being in those meetings. And now you're having that starting. You're seeing it. iHeart's been great. You go into a meeting there, you see Alyssa, Marissa, Beata, people like that. I think it's crazy. 50-something% of your listenership, or more, sometimes 60, is female, but you have no women. And I think the DSPs are underrepresented by women in the actual gatekeeping and programming. So we just have to make them conscious of it and almost embarrass them. We had a meeting with one of the big DSPs, and not one woman came to the meeting. It was 8 guys. And he said, couldn't you find somebody? Couldn't you get a central casting? This is embarrassing. How do we have this meeting? And then I had a meeting at an agency, and Jeff Newberg is here, he'll tell you, I went to one of the biggest agencies in the world, talent agencies. He said, you don't have any women? This was a town hall, and I sort of refused to speak. I think, did I walk out, Jeff?
Yeah, you left.
I left. I said, I can't speak to you.
Wow.
You have to have somebody. And I actually used probably a disrespectful, I said, you must be somebody here, female. You know what I was saying? Because I did see somebody cleaning. And I said, can't you guys get over it? Can't you guys call one woman in this room? That I found really strange in the talent agency business. So you have to do things like that and be bold and embarrass people.
Yeah.
And then they look at themselves and say, you're right. How do we make a decision and try and bring in 30,000 people, 16 to 18,000 female customers, and not one woman is in the decision-making part? That's stupid.
By the way, there's a famous story about Beyonce coming into a meeting for some sort of, brand endorsement thing, and she walks into a room full of white men, and she just left because she was like, clearly you guys don't know my audience or my world, and I think that's becoming more commonplace. Jennifer.
Well, I mean, Daniel, thank you for proving why I needed to start the Justice Department. I mean, I obviously started this entire business because of this, and until the decision makers represent 50% of women across all, record companies, radio, talent agencies, we're not even close to being, there. The great thing about fighting for women is that we represent every race, religion, socioeconomic background. We're 50% of the population, so you champion women, you champion everything. I'm on the Annenberg Inclusion Initiative board, and the record industry is diverse for sure. It's just there's lack of females in decision-making roles. The ones that are there are amazing. I love them. They've been champions, mentors, friends of mine. But there's so much room for so much more. And, everybody thinks, it's this women's issue. We're so sick of talking about the women's issue. I don't want to talk about it either, but it's not a women's issue. This is a human rights issue. This is, our population is made up 50% women. It's going to be over 50% Latino, and yet our gender pay gap is not meant to close until 2070 in the United States, when my daughter is 76 years old. And if you're African American, it's 2119, and if you're a Latina woman, it's 2224. How is that not like a bigger issue for people? Like, if women were equal to men financially, this world would be a much better place. That's all there is to it.
I can comment on this one too.
Yes, Steve.
So we started, I'd say, in the first 2 years as we were pretty small, very, very white male, and very electronic music producer kind of focused. And we made a commitment as we were scaling, is that we didn't feel like we were representing all musicians well. And that, we took a lot of pride in making sure that we were being very conscious about hiring, not just for, the good of, the equality internally, but also for our users, to represent them externally and make sure that we're, have a wide, like when people come in, we want to know what their favorite artists are to see if we can work with them, see if we can do sample packs with them, and just make sure that we're like kind of really covering how wide of an opportunity it is to represent all musicians. And, we had a really hard situation when we surveyed our user base. The producer community is like very male. Our user base is 95% male from surveying. And, a lot of the women artists we would work with would post stuff on their social media and get attacked in ways that were just terrible to see. And so we have a lot of women and general diversity initiatives going on for the artists that we work with. Education, ways to think about education to try to change that demographic early on. And we think we need to do that with a very diverse team. Our engineering team, last time I checked, is 40% women, which for an engineering, a software team is like, yeah, thanks. It's like orders of magnitude off the norm. So it's, standard deviations off the norm. So we make it a conscious effort, and that's what we think we need to do to represent all musicians.
That's great. I'm so glad to hear that. The music industry, I said at the top, it's a tough business. It's tough to make it. It's tough to make it when you're a curator of music. It's tough to make it when you're trying to, move up at a record label. Why do you guys stick with it? Where do you see the industry going? Because, no one's retiring anytime soon. Marilyn, we're all looking at you.
Well,
What's the health of the music industry right now?
I mean, I think music is stronger than ever before. There's more creativity, and there's so many ways to earn a living. I think we know that it'll change quicker in the future than it has even in the recent past, and the changes over the last 5 years have been much greater than the changes in the 3 previous decades that I worked. But I think if you have that spirit, if you have the love of, not only the love of music, but the love of championing artists, there will always be ways to do it, and those ways are going to continue to change. We're working with the artist Rez, who's going to be who just announced today that she's going to be debuting her album in a virtual reality world. Who would have thought of that? We have artists who are performing in video games. Having a college-age son, I've spent years trying to avoid video games, and now it's a business we're definitely going to be in. But in terms of the community, you get to work with people who share your passions. Daniel and I have known each other for a long time. We worked on Jesus Jones. But when we had the opportunity to connect recently on Eunice Mavant, who's playing Baby's All Right on Friday, it's the same sense of excitement and shared passion and absolute ferocity and absolute desire to overcome all odds, which breaking an artist nowadays is very difficult. But if it's something that you love to do and you love to be around people who enjoy it, today I see, there's other Surefire staff. Mark Satloff is here, Nina Lee, Rebecca Shapiro, our dear friend Pete Shapiro. To have these kind of people in our lives and to work with them is really just such a blessing.
That's great. Daniel, you want to weigh in on that?
Well, if I'm under 30 or even under 25 listening to Marilyn, she just gave you pearls of wisdom, whoever's listening. I think she bottled up, summarized hard work, true relationships, her communication skills, her sincerity, her passion. I think my other comments on where it's going and why the business is going to grow is pretty simple. The global situation is pretty great. So I think everybody up here, from Splice all the way down here, is really, we're looking at scratching the surface right now in India. We have seen our numbers explode in Brazil, Chile, Colombia, Mexico, Peru. As in our company, those are top 7 markets now, where we used to see Germany, Canada, the UK, many, many records, they're not even top 7. So that's a change, which I think is a great change to see the opportunity there. I agree with Jennifer, we haven't even seen the scratching of the surface of the Latin music boom, and I think the Indian music boom around the world. So I think those are opportunities for young people to get excited. My comment, what Marilyn was saying previously, is that for the young people to think about going to this business as the lifestyle, it's very, very hard work. And you have to want to work and have to want to do it. And I do say 7 days a week. And if you don't like 7 days a week, you shouldn't do it. Do something else. You don't have to do this. And it's that passion that you have to put when you identify or associate yourself with music, artistry, and really do that. And the networking that we've done, because that's a word people like to use, networking, and it's like kale, like rock star, disturbing, and all these words. But with the networking, I think Lauren said it before, you don't do that by email and LinkedIn and texting. It's getting to know each other. When I was excited about Jesus Jones, we went to see Marilyn. She was like, she is a goddess because she trained our head of press that worked, at Chrysalis, and if she liked Jesus Jones, it made us exciting. When she likes Eunice from Iceland, And, you know, and she went to Iceland. She didn't go to the beach that weekend. She went to Iceland to see Junius. I didn't go. She was there. So you're 21 years old. Get off your behind and go. Find a way to get there. You know, that's how you make it. And you have to want to do those things. So forget about LinkedIn and texting and emailing and stuff. Go see people and have real relationships over other stuff besides, you know, the lunch, breakfast, dinner business. You have to do those things, and that's how you really get to know people, and you just rattled off a bunch of great people. You know how you get to know each other. So it's a different lifestyle, and I really think there's never been a better time to enter our business for a young person. We did have 15 bad years, and we weren't mentoring. One of my solutions, by the way, on the female issue is female executives have to hire female executives, and they don't, which is another issue. Like, you know, it happens in, you know, I happen to be Jewish, and like, you know, I always said the biggest anti-Semites were Jews years ago, and how do you keep people out of organizations? You know, it's many things like that. So I get so excited. I heard Emily Lazar is mastering a record for us this week, but there's got to be more than one Emily Lazar. Got to be more than one.
I mean, she's busy as hell, so good
She's
for her.
busy, but I hope she's hiring women. I don't know.
There's Heba Kadri, who's also great.
I didn't know. Who? Heather?
Yeah, who worked with Emily before.
Oh, okay.
Look, on the production side, like Steve was saying, there is a major problem.
Yeah.
And I think it's because the music making environment, the studio environment, is not all that welcoming to women. Even the Beyonce song Girls was written by a guy. You know, like, think about that. It's kind of absurd. And I don't really, I mean, I know there's a lot of efforts being made by the Recording Academy and other organizations, but I, as someone who covers the music business, have not seen any movement in this realm.
So maybe it's work ethic. You know, I think of Valerie Simpson. I think of Diane Warren as two gigantic song. They're workaholics.
Yes.
The work ethic of writing, but they network, they work the industry. I still see Valerie and I still see Diane working it. She's still at the Oscars every year.
Yep.
They work hard.
And she owns all her publishing.
And Gaga's a writer.
Yep.
Who works harder than her?
True.
And they own their publishing. You're right.
I think one of the things I'm excited about that helps with this problem is, you know, there's a lot of power dynamics, and there's a lot of, you know, the superstar artist, and then there's like all these people who kind of work on the track, might get credited, might get paid a little bit, might not even get recognized. It might have been a woman, doesn't even get recognized for it. But we're kind of really raising the middle class. There's a real opportunity here. The amount of people who are contributing to tracks now, the amount of people we're having who are good at one piece of the music process, whether it's mastering or for us, like sound design, vocal writing. Like, take someone like Kara, who I think you met at our conference. She was working at Jersey Mike's Subs as a shift manager, and we had her do a vocal pack on Splice. She hit it big. She's got a big publishing deal now. She's working with all her dream artists, and she got to do all of that on her own terms, because, you know, some of the ways that deals get done, you don't have a lot of leverage because you're going from like barely eating at Jersey Mike's Subs to like, you know, a musician. But by giving people money earlier for their creative contributions, you know, she's making a few grand a month just off this one pack she probably did in a week. And that changed the power dynamics so much that she didn't have to sign some deal or slave away at something because she was just hoping to get some recognition. She actually so for us, we see such an opportunity for these people who have found their way to contribute to a track early on and start building their career not just on waiting to get a hit or waiting to become an artist even. You can do, you know, Gray, we talked about this too. They were working at Fuddruckers and then put a pack out on Splice, had enough money to quit, and had, you know, now they have the middle and Song of the Year and all that stuff. So it's pretty amazing that if we give people opportunity and can get recognized for not just being this kind of famous artist side, we can kind of smooth that curve out and create a much better middle class, and those are the opportunities we have now.
Oh, that's great. Well, I'm going to open it up for questions, but one last thing I wanted to ask. What have we learned, as Howard Stern would say? Something I think is very interesting from talking to you guys is that, your entrepreneurship sort of kicked in later. You had experiences working for other companies. And I almost want to ask Nabil, if you were to start a record store today, would you do it better because of your age and of your experience?
Yeah, I've never thought about that. I don't think so. I think, weirdly, I know too much now, and I think there's really something to just be, we did it for $30,000. It was a lot of money at the time, but it wasn't going to bankrupt us. We got a small loan, and I think we just figured it out. We both worked at another record store for a couple of years, and we were lucky, and we were smart, and we had friends in bands and everything, and I think now, weirdly, I think I would try too hard and know too much. I'm not saying it wouldn't work, but there's something really just exciting and lucky about just trying it and having it work, which you can do when you're 25.
Well,
and
it's almost
when
like
you don't have a family or a mortgage, or
Right.
it's a totally different time to do it, and it was really exciting and fun.
So it's like you're smart enough to know that the economics of it are really not that favorable.
Yeah. There are better retail businesses to be
Right.
in right now.
Right, which,
Most of them, yeah.
says a lot about wisdom gained, for sure. Cool, well, thank you guys. If there are any questions, okay, we got one. We got a microphone right there.
Just want to say thanks for coming and talked a lot about great topics as far as an entrepreneurship standpoint. But there was one key factor that I was curious to hear if maybe you guys had some insight about. As an entrepreneur, a lot of people talk about location, and there was topics about talking about traveling and showing up and things like that, and opening up a record store in Seattle in the 90s, that's definitely a great move. So, just talking about something of today and 2019 and in the future, what do you guys see as, location as far as the music business?
That's a great question. I mean, when you can work remotely from anywhere, does it matter where you are?
I mean, the barrier to entry right now, as I just learned myself, is, to starting a business, which is even much different than 5 years ago, is literally a laptop, Wi-Fi, and a phone. You don't need a physical space immediately for the most part. People are transient; they're all over the place. And, you do need face-to-face, like Daniel was even saying, like this is a business that we all know each other for a long time. And half your battle, it's not learning the business of it because it's not that complicated. I went to Cornell Law School. They're still upset with me for choosing this as my legal profession. But knowing people and getting to know them, that, in the music industry, that's half your battle right there.
I mean, we have a distributed engineering team who's everywhere, and that's okay. It makes some, there's some collaboration challenges and things like that. But I will say that, for fundraising and recruiting at certain executive levels, if you're not doing that, I mean, it gets really difficult outside of New York, SF, LA in a lot of those ways. And we had no real LA presence. I mean, we had an engineering LA presence, but not with our artists. And then all of a sudden we spent time there, and we're we just got 100 things done in a week that we would have taken us months in this flying out occasionally type thing. So I think you got to test where it's important for your business, whether it's where your users are, where the talent is, and your location strategy is going to be very much you have to understand how it factors into whatever you're doing. And for us, it's great because we have access to all this engineering talent all over the country. We can recruit kind of at different executive levels and different functions on the coasts. And then we have a team, an A&R team that we're building out in LA because that's where we need to get shit done.
And quickly, for my business, and I still think for the label business and the media business, it's New York.
Yeah.
That's just where everyone is. It's why. It's why you're talking about your band playing at Baby's All Right on Friday. It's because you can get everyone down, or you can try to get everyone down, and that's how you get something started.
They will be there.
That's interesting to hear you say that as someone who left New York for LA, thinking that the music industry, was out there, but it's a different part of the music industry, I've learned. Okay, other questions? Yep, right here in the front. Oh. She raised her hand, so I'm going to give it to her. There you go.
Thank you so much for this. This has been awesome and inspiring. I hate to bring it back to gender, but I'm going to, because you actually told me to, but indirectly. Can we speak? I would love to hear from Jennifer and Marilyn specifically about maybe you could tell a story or some of the sexism that you've experienced, maybe something unbelievable, because I think a lot of people, as someone who was just recently wrongfully terminated for reporting harassment, I don't think a lot of men even realize this is happening. And also, the legal definition of harassment is way more than we even realize if you've never looked into it, the legalities of it. Second part of that is also, what do you think men can do to be better allies to women? Obviously, you have all of you guys have done amazing things for women, but would love to hear both sides of those coin.
Jennifer?
You know, having represented women my entire career, I mean, you know, from being called sweetie, cutie, honey, all that kind of stuff, my entire career, that's always happened. But, you know, I think what has disturbed me even more, and representing women over the years who literally got paid half of what the man doing the exact same job at the sister label was getting and had better experience, and, you know, it's been crazy, but it hasn't gotten any better, unfortunately. And now, because I represent so many female executives across every single, you know, thing, because we represent people, and I don't just work in the music industry. I work in media, fashion, tech, and just across the board. And the stories are just as bad, if not worse. And because sexual harassment is the, you know, hot topic, and that gets all the news, the gender inequality pay just gets glossed over, and it's rampant. Women working for News Corp with 8-person teams, running the team, bringing in $100 million a year, and the 2 guys that she was about to fire making twice as much as her. You know, that's all day long. The woman at NBC who comes back from her job, has been there for 15 years, comes back from maternity leave. Oh, we no longer have the job. This is this week alone of me finding out these things. This Tuesday, like this, you know, we should be ashamed of ourselves, actually. And you know, if you run a company and you can do an audit, what men can do is join this fight with us, because it is a human issue. It's not a women's issue. We work just as hard. We're just as smart. We're 46% of the workplace. 57% of the bachelor degrees go to women. Like, we're obviously smart. Just because we have kids does not make us any worse. I was a way better worker after I'm a single mom too, 2 children. I've started my own business. We can do this, you know, like all day long. So, you know, it is about doing an audit, and thank you. But a pay audit is really where people should start. They should, you know, like Salesforce does. Mark Benioff has had to do it twice now, and he's told everybody, like, I told you to pay them the same. Like, why does this keep happening? And women, for ourselves, we need to negotiate our salaries. Don't just say yes. Ask for more. Like, it's not just men's fault. Okay, it's women's too. We have to both take blame and responsibility of this. But I really do think one of the biggest things that at Annenberg I'm dealing with Dr. Stacy Smith is the pay audit. And you don't put people's names. You say, we have, you know, 1,000 people. These are, you know, C-level, director, VP. These are women. These are men. This is what they're getting paid. And it forces you to look at it, just like the UK did. I mean, they didn't seem to do anything about it, unfortunately, but, you know.
It was a good headline.
But yeah.
Marilyn?
I think it's very important for all of us executives to be looking at salary parity, and sometimes these things start with junior employees, and they just become magnified as people work their way up the career ladder. So it's very important that all coordinators, junior this, junior that, are all paid in accordance with their experience and their job description. I think I don't have any really personal stories about harassment. Very early in the record business, I felt like a country bumpkin coming to New York, and I was surprised in the kind of wild atmosphere at Columbia Records, the amount of touching that was going on. And I just said, I don't like back rubs, which seemed to put me in a different category from a lot of people. So I think we're now in an environment where touching is not considered part of business etiquette at all. I think one of our Democratic candidates has already is grappling with this in public and not particularly successfully. But just in terms of ongoing attitudes, I've been very interested in the lack of parity, for example, in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. I think the female is 8% or 13% or something that just really doesn't make sense. And in terms of kind of the attitude, and I think this was the case for me even as I initially began to think about it, because I was working with an artist who I thought very much deserved to be in, a female. And I was told that her team had gone to one of the poobahs at the Rock Hall and was told, oh yes, we want her to get in, but I'm working on another woman first. And this conversation went on for a couple of years, and the person I was interested in kept waiting for that slot to open. And when I heard this, I realized that my artist isn't competing against other female artists. It's because a number are very deserving. I don't want to pit my artist who deserves to be in against other artists were their hits bigger, were they more transformative. It's really about looking at the whole field. And in terms of the Rock Hall, I think the only way to catch up is to have 1 or 2 years of basically all women, and we're still going to be behind at that point.
Wow. Well, thank you guys so much for your
we can
insight.
do one more question. We can do one more question. One more.
Sorry, okay. I was like, who's talking? One more.
It's me.
Hi, that was a terrific panel. Thank you. And one thing I've been seeing a lot of lately, and this is music business, but almost all businesses, but certainly most in the music business, is ageism being a major thing. I mean, we all work for ourselves. I work for myself. It's not something that, is a problem for me, but anyone I know that loses a job at 36 or something, even that young and up, go out and try and find a job, trying to get, respectable pay. I mean, I think, Daniel, you mentioned that, mentors. I mean, mentors are important, having the Seymour Steins, the Michelle Anthonys, all of us, there for people to learn from. And there just seems to be no respect anymore for mentorship and people. And, people's parents can afford to even, live. We're not dying at, 70, 75 anymore. The retirement age isn't really 65 anymore, right? We probably are good in the workforce till 75, but yet we're kind of out to pasture, in the mid-40s or maybe younger. I mean, I heard someone talking the other day that was like 38 saying she was the oldest person in her company. I mean, at 38, you're barely at the prime of your life. So I just think it's such a hard thing because there's an issue, of course, that people will sue for ageism or other things, but it's a very, most of our population is aging. And I think that's something that you don't hear about. It's not a sexy topic. And I'm just curious to know, you guys, I mean, really trying to build up the mentorship and the loyalties that aren't there anymore. I don't know if this.
Daniel, any insight on that? I mean, I think...
I'm the wrong person because I don't hire by age. It's not a factor. I think it's harder in my book, in my world, for a younger person to get a job. I think the high school, college kids are having a really hard time getting a job, and a lot of it's their own issues of how they present themselves and how they follow through, which is something they've never been mentored. I think you're bringing up a good point. I'm not going to deflect or kind of go to a different place, but I think find a mentor. I think there's, this is the week and the month you read about college speeches, graduation speeches, and I think you see that word a lot. And I have a son graduating in a few days from college, and he's found a couple of mentors, really amazing people who he'll remember the rest of his life. And I said, you're not going to remember the friends, the kids you met in college, you're going to remember these people, and they'll be with you. So I think that's the advice, is to tell people to find them, because the Seymours and the Michelles, they do give you the time. They're great. All the people we've just mentioned, rattled off here. But it's up to you to find them, That doesn't solve your question about ageism and why someone over 38 can't find a job. I'm not addressing that, but I'm addressing the young person. And I think then, I actually think people over 38 are more valuable than ever. I think they're real relationships. They know how to communicate better. They actually know how to make a phone call, visit somebody, look someone in the eye. They could write with a pen. I think it's a very valuable commodity being over 38 because you learn cursive and you learn how to send a real letter back. And so I think they're very valuable to companies. And I don't know about Splice, but all the new startups, if you look at the unicorns, there's some people from 38 to 75 on those boards behind the scenes advising them what to do. And Roger was brilliant before, Roger McNamee, and I think maybe that's what's missing in some of these young people who've had these fast rises of success not being balanced. I sit with Jerry Moss, who has to be, I don't know how old he is, he must be in his late 70s, maybe more, at least twice a year for guidance. I go back to school. If I can get Seymour for 10 minutes, I'll do that. If I could speak to any of these characters, I see Chris Wright 3 times a year. And I just want to learn. I want to know what shouldn't I do more than what should I do. So they're very useful. They're very, very important people. And I think they're doing okay, some of those people. But getting jobs, I think that's an issue. And I think some of the better corporate companies do hire people over 38. I hope.
I mean, they are pretty accessible. Like, Marty Bandier just left his company. Like, he had to go out kicking and screaming, and he's 80 years old. Seymour, very accessible. I see him at conferences all the time. And they make time to speak to journalists like me. So I feel like maybe the music industry might be just a little bit better about it, but that's not to say there's not room for improvement. Marilyn?
But I think it is a very important point, and I think a healthy company, certainly Surefire at its best really benefits from having many different experiences, especially in a world where things are changing so fast. We couldn't succeed without the staff who've been with us. I mentioned Mark Zatloff and Rebecca, who are here, who've been with the company for 20 years. That's an amazing blessing. At the same time, Nina has been with the company less than 5 years. She's as much of a leader, and the people in their 20s and 30s and 40s all contribute something. So it feels like really what we should be thinking about is being inclusive with age and experience, as well as gender
and race. Yeah. Okay. Thank you, guys. Thank you, everyone.